Alright, welcome back to my series in coding in C++. Now, in the last video, we learned how to receive user input and store it in a variable, and we also learned about two types of variables, integer and string. Now, that's all well, but what can we really do with this right now? We can take an input from a user and display it back out to the screen, which is useful sometimes, but most of the time you can't do a whole lot with that. So, today we are going to learn everything we need to know about variable operations. So this one is going to be a little bit heavy-handed in math, and computer science is a little bit heavy in math, so just try to keep this in mind. I'm going to try to show you how to do most of it by this video, that way none of it gets too confusing. So just for plain reasons, I'm going to put integer a and declare it, and integer b, because they're not going to be inherently super important variables. We're just going to do some simple math operations for them, because in today's video we're going to look at operations, loops, context of loops, syntax, and some applications for them. So there are four basic mathematical functions that C++ includes, and that is addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication. Now these are all denounced by, of course, the plus, minus, slash for divide, and star for multiply. Now, if you're not familiar with computer math, you must understand that slash and star are universally divide and multiply. Alright, so let's try to just do some simple operations. We're going to say we don't want to take any user input yet, so we're just going to say integer a equals 5 and integer b equals 7. Now, what we want to do with these, we want to add them, so we also must have another integer in which to store the result. Now this one will be important, so we're actually going to name it res for result. So we are going to put integer res because math in C++ is left-handed, meaning it is important. You can't put 1 plus 2 equals 3. It's actually 3 equals 1 plus 2. So math is a little bit backwards in C++. So we're going to do res. We don't actually need this integer sign because it's already declared, but the variable res equals a plus b, and then semicolon. That's a math line. Then we want to cout, which is in IOStream. We want to cout res because we want to display our result to the screen. Then I'm going to go ahead and make some new lines using /n. That way we can just keep our outputs nice. Then we're going to, of course, we're going to do everything. So we're going to go ahead and then subtract a minus b, and the integer value, it can store integers, whole numbers, positive and negative, but it cannot store decimals. For that, you would need a different type of variable, and you'll see that whenever we get to where we divide, it won't put out a decimal number. It'll just put out the integer form, and that's it, because we don't have the correct structure for it to do that. We don't have the correct type of variable. Now we will go ahead and cover that variable in this video, that way I can just show you guys what I'm talking about. So then we also want to be able to multiply. So res equals a star. Remember, star is the universal multiplication symbol. And then really this is all there is to C++ math. It's pretty easy. Besides being backwards, it is really, I believe, one of the easiest coding languages to do math in. Now, I'm not super skilled in others, but I do know some JavaScript and Python and other languages. If you all would want to see me do a tutorial on those, just leave a comment down in the comments section, and we might be able to do some of those tutorials. But of all of those, C++ is, in my opinion, the easiest to do math with, because it is a basic language. It's a very old language, and so it was made to do math, so it's very easy to do math with. So now that we've got all that, we've got our return put out. That's all we need to do for that. So we're going to add 5 and 7, subtract 5 and 7, multiply 5 and 7, and divide 5 and 7. So we'll just save that, then hop over to the terminal where we can swap the directory, as always, to where we saved it. Now this isn't going to be the same for everyone. It's definitely not, yours is definitely not going to be the same as mine because I have my own folder. So if you're in Linux, just remember where you save it, and then go ahead and compile. And in Windows, it'll do everything itself if you get an IDE such as Dev C++. And an IDE is just an integrated development environment. So it's got some useful functions in it. Like this doesn't have an automatic compile and run, but it does have some highlighting and some basic correction software with it. Now in Windows, they're much more versatile because they run directly through Windows and they can compile it by a button click, but in Linux you do have to type it in because Linux is more of a development situation. So now we've got that, we're just going to go ahead and run that program, and as you can see, we have 12, 2, 35, and 0. And you might be thinking, 0? 5 divided by 7 is not 0, but like I said, that is because it's actually not designed to store this information, and C++ doesn't round, so it's just going to store it as 0. Now, if we make the res, we're going to put float in res. Float means a floating point integer, also known as a decimal. So now it should be able to handle the division, and if we go back, recompile, and rerun this software, then you can see it still runs with 0 because we don't have it set to run a number. As you can see, even though we have integer main, we're using integer numbers and not floating point numbers. But if we had everything floating in an ideal world, if we had everything floating, if our computer would do the math with the floating points, then it would return a real value. But it's not very intuitive to have decimals running in a program because they do like to complicate things. Like if you're trying to set if a value equals 5.9 versus 5.7, it's harder for the computer to distinguish that between 6 and 7. It's due to clocking issues in some of your older CPUs, which I'm running on an older CPU, so it can cause some clocking issues and not want to work there, but that's more of a hardware side of it. And if you have a high-end computer, you're not going to have to worry about any of these issues. So those are basic math operations. You will use those probably very frequently if you're doing any severe coding. So we're just going to go ahead and change that to integer C because we're no longer going to be using this to do much math. Now I'm going to move on and talk about loops. And loops are very useful. They allow you to repeat a certain function. So the one I use most, there's several types of loops. The one I use most is called a do while, but there's also a for. Like the for loop is for, and then you put your parentheses and a condition. So if x equals 2, anytime a equals 2, anytime a equals 2, it'll run anything you put into the body of it, and it'll check it at the beginning. The do while, it's basically the same exact loop, except for it checks at the bottom. It checks its values all at the bottom of the code instead of at the top. So if I want to see out hello world, I want to put that out as my integer, and I want to do that while a is equaling 0, which it equals right now. Then we put a semicolon to signify that we're done. We save our program, and we go back and we're going to recompile it. Now that we've got this compiled, we run it, and it should just make an infinite loop that outputs hello world, because it wouldn't, because actually a has a value of null. It doesn't actually equal 0 because it doesn't equal anything. But if we set it equal to 0 and ran it, if your computer is configured correctly, you should be able to make it give you an infinite loop, which I don't have mine set up because I have some software that automatically terminates it, but it will, on most computers, it will create an infinite loop, because a right now is equal to 0. Now I'm going to go ahead and change some settings in here to let me go ahead and run this. And it should give you, now it should give an infinite loop. As you can see, I have a slow CPU, so it's not running it very quickly by any means. But it is now running in infinite loop mode, and it will not stop. No matter what you do, you can type, you can click, it won't stop until you close out the terminal itself. Eventually, this can bog down a computer to the point it crashes. But just remember, now for syntax, remember to put 2 equals. When you're doing a comparison, you're doing 2 equal signs. That means you're testing if A is equal to. If you just use 1 equal, you're actually setting the value equal to that, which you don't want to do. If you set the value equal to it, you will do what I did earlier, and you will get 1 output instead of many. Now, that's all for this video, guys. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to tune in next time, because our next video is going to be conditionals, meaning we're going to test values and perform certain code if the values equal true. So be sure to tune in for that. Like I said, hit that like and subscribe buttons, ring the bell icon so you get a new notification every time I post, and I will see you next time.